Some of you might still remember those heated debates back in the late '90s and early 2000s, when the world desperately needed to crown the next Arnold Schwarzenegger. Arnie was already starting to fade out, flirting with politics and generally looking like he had better things to do than flex on camera. So Hollywood went into full panic mode, searching for someone just like him, but also completely different. The whole idea was pretty doomed from the start. I mean, nowadays you can replace any actor and no one bats an eye, but people actually went to the cinema for the actor. You needed someone big, literally, and tall enough to make other guys look like garden gnomes. That Steven Seagal technically fit the size chart, but he started absorbing space like a dying star and quickly spiraled into his own bizarre genre. So the suits decided, time to look elsewhere. Throughout the 90s, Hollywood kept trying. They were on a relentless quest for the next Arnold, usually digging through piles of ex-football players and bodybuilders, hoping one of them could act, but most couldn't. One of their prime picks was Brian Bosworth. They threw $25 million at him, gave him Lance Henriksen for backup, and told him to shoot everything in a movie called Stone Cold. It bombed harder than a protein fart in an elevator. The audience stayed home, critics tore it apart, and Brian walked away with a shiny golden raspberry for Worst New Star. Just when the muscle dream seemed dead, The Mummy Returns exploded at the box office, and the universe decided to take a very different turn. Dwayne Johnson really took the Schwarzenegger playbook and ran with it. He did the kid-friendly movies, shook hands with everyone who had a pulse, and carefully built up that self-made nice guy image. And yeah, Dwayne is a complicated man. He doesn't go anywhere without his favorite baseball bat, which he allegedly uses to motivate his managers when they start slowing down or orbiting him without proper reverence. Oh, and he also has an actual master of plastic bottles on payroll, not even kidding. When The Rock's too busy to walk to the bathroom, that guy steps in. This isn't some behind-the-scenes prank. The idea was to save time and shoot more scenes without taking bathroom breaks. Basically, Dwayne was out here literally pissing for productivity, all in the name of saving the producers a few bucks. But just like any megastar, Dwayne's got his fair share of haters. Even the world's most famous Family Guy isn't a fan. At one point, he literally said he'd beat the crap out of Dwayne Johnson if only the guy wasn't built like a mountain. Why? Because, according to him, The Rock is cocky and ungrateful. Then again, people say the exact same thing about the Family Guy, so who's the bigger jerk? Still, for a while, Dwayne, along with Leonardo DiCaprio, was one of the last true movie stars, the kind of guy who could make weird, totally random films, ones that weren't sequels, spin-offs, or part of some cinematic universe, and still crush the box office. But just like Leo, Dwayne's luck started to wobble. Suddenly everyone had a story. Oh, he's not actually that sweet. He's kind of toxic. He pees in bottles. Standard Hollywood drama. So yeah, today we're talking about Dwayne Johnson, the last true action hero who crawled out of the wrestling ring and body slammed his way into Hollywood's A-list. If you believe Forbes, and let's be honest, they love counting other people's money, The Rock spent a few years sitting comfortably at the very top, the highest paid actor in all of Tinseltown. At first, Dwayne had dreams of becoming a football legend. Things were looking pretty decent. He scored a scholarship and played for his college team, but greatness wasn't exactly falling into his lap, and soon he found himself riding the bench. So, by the mid-90s, he said goodbye to the football and hello to the wrestling ring. That was the family business. His dad, his grandma, his uncles, hell, probably even the family dog held a championship belt at some point. So, at 23, Dwayne realized it might be easier to achieve greatness if your whole bloodline already comes with spandex and entrance music. And hey, family doesn't leave their own behind. In just a few years, The Rock became the face of wrestling, smashing records, electrifying arenas, and turning eyebrow raises into a combat move. His first big movie was supposed to be The One. Well, that was the working title. The project didn't even have a real name during pre-production, so everyone just called it The Rock's Movie 1. Everything was going smoothly until the folks behind The Mummy showed up and dangled a small role in front of Dwayne. It wasn't a huge part, but Dwayne, or more likely his managers, figured it'd be a smarter move for launching his film career. So he bailed on movie 1. The movie still didn't have a proper title when he left. They just took The Rock out, slapped on the number 1, and moved on. Mummy Returns became Dwayne Johnson's first official movie that had absolutely nothing to do with wrestling. And let's be honest, what people really remember from that film is his infamous CGI clone in the final battle. It looked like a PlayStation 2 cutscene had a baby with a fever dream. Most of the blame goes to the studio. After the massive success of the first Mummy, the studio execs basically kicked down the director's door screaming to make a sequel yesterday. The pressure hit everything. The script, the pacing, the visual effects. Director Stephen Sommers begged for more time, but Hollywood was like, nah, we got a release date to hit and money to count. So instead of giving the VFX team months to create the Scorpion King, they handed it to them 2 weeks before the premiere. And if that wasn't enough of a disaster, they didn't even bother giving the effects team a storyboard. Or, an actual finished design of what the hell the Scorpion King was supposed to look like. And that's how we ended up with the now iconic and slightly meme-worthy Scorpion King. Surprisingly, none of that cursed CGI held the film back. In fact, audiences loved Dwayne. So naturally, the studio greenlit a spin-off faster than you can raise an eyebrow. Dwayne's character, now officially named the Scorpion King, got his own movie, and The Rock got a paycheck of $5.5 million for it. That's the highest salary ever paid to an actor for their first leading role in a film. Dwayne claimed he made a conscious effort to avoid all his wrestling trademarks while acting. No signature moves, no wrestler vibes, none of that SmackDown energy. The idea was to help audiences separate his character from the Rock persona. He only broke that rule once during a harem scene where he slipped in his signature eyebrow raise. To make the Scorpion King movie happen, the filmmakers had to bring Vince McMahon on board as a producer. Why? Because Dwayne's wrestling nickname, The Rock, showed up in the credits. And Vince, being Vince, legally owns a chunk of that name and a chunk of the money that comes with it. So reports say Dwayne had to give him around 10-15% every time he used the name in a movie. So yeah, even when The Rock was acting, Vince was still backstage counting stacks. Originally, the movie was supposed to be much darker. Johnson's character was grittier, meaner, closer to the ruthless guy we saw in The Mummy Returns. But right before filming started, the studio panicked. Wait, what if this is too intense for families? What if moms don't want their kids watching people get their heads twisted off like bottle caps? So they toned it down. Gone were the brutal scenes. In came the jokes. The Scorpion King got himself a personality makeover. And if that wasn't enough chaos, get this. They actually cut several scenes before shooting even started. When the producers watched the first cut, it clocked in at a whopping 1 hour and 10 minutes. Not quite epic fantasy territory. So they rushed out for reshoots to stretch it to a proper 90-minute runtime. The movie did well at the box office, made $181 million on a $60 million budget, but still, some expected more. Dwayne made his big screen comeback a year later with The Rundown, also known in some regions as Welcome to the Jungle. And guess who showed up for a surprise cameo? None other than Arnold Schwarzenegger, casually passing the torch and wishing Dwayne good luck right there on screen. In one scene, Dwayne was supposed to playfully jab star William Scott with a fake knife. Only problem, it wasn't fake. Thinking it was all movie magic, Dwayne went full psycho mode and started aggressively poking Scott with what he thought was a prop. It was not a prop. Scott ended up needing stitches, and whoever handed The Rock a real knife that day, they never fessed up. So, it looked fun on camera, but for Scott, it was more jackass than jungle adventure. When The Rock politely refused to go down a massive slide for a stunt, they called in his cousin as a stand-in, and the guy absolutely nailed it. He flew so convincingly that he broke a leg and cracked a couple of ribs, but hey, he later got loaded with stuntman awards for that glorious crash landing. The movie cost around $85 million to make and barely scraped in $80 million at the box office. Most people blame the bloated budget, and they're not wrong. Originally, the plan was to shoot in Brazil. But just before filming started, armed robbers literally jacked the entire crew and made off with all their gear and cash. So they yanked the whole production out of Brazil and dropped it onto the much safer and much pricier beaches of Hawaii. Dwayne's next movie, Walking Tall, also didn't exactly walk tall at the box office. The film takes place in a real county in Washington state, one that's actually famous for having one of the lowest crime rates. So naturally, the internet had a field day joking about what happens when you drop Johnny Knoxville and Dwayne Johnson into the safest place in America. Dwayne once again brought some extra chaos to set. There was a scene where he was supposed to make a dramatic hand motion near a Porsche, and the VFX team would handle the rest. But he went full smash mode and actually punched the lights out. According to him, nobody clearly explained that he wasn't supposed to. That Porsche was a rental, and surprise, not insured for being uppercutted by a former wrestler, so the studio had to buy it outright. $90,000 gone in a blink. As for the movie, it made $57 million on a $46 million budget. Not a total disaster, but definitely not the box office flex they were hoping for. Dwayne had signed on to this one right after The Scorpion King and was paid a fat $15 million for it. After a couple of rough landings, Dwayne started choosing his projects a bit more carefully. He even agreed to take on supporting roles, like in Be Cool, the sequel to Get Shorty. It failed to match the success of Get Shorty, and despite a budget of $55 million, it only managed to scrape up $95 million worldwide. Around that time, Doom hit theaters, a highly anticipated adaptation of the legendary video game. Vin Diesel was originally offered the lead role, but he passed, so the studio turned to Dwayne Johnson. But after reading the script, Dwayne pulled a plot twist of his own. He asked for a different role, not the one they initially offered him. Apparently, the other guy part seemed way more interesting to him, so the lead went to Karl Urban instead, and the movie flopped harder than a LAN party with no pizza. The action didn't land, the plot was a mess, and fans of the game mostly just screamed, "Why?" into the void. After some downright brutal test screenings, the studio didn't bother with reshoots. Around 30 minutes of footage got chopped. Later, they tried to salvage things by putting 10 minutes of the cut content back into a director's cut, which of course came out quietly on home release. But by then, it was too late. So Doom pulling in just $58 million on a $60 million budget. Things were looking real bad. On the horizon, there were whispers of films that smelled suspiciously like straight-to-DVD territory. So Dwayne made a sharp pivot. Later, he'd claim the decision wasn't even his. Apparently, his managers convinced him it was time to switch gears. Straight into kids' movies and goofy side roles. He now says that move almost killed his career. Dwayne's kid-friendly era kicked off with Gridiron Gang, a feel-good sports drama that immediately flopped, grossing just $41 million on a $30 million budget. Next up, Southland Tales by Richard Kelly, the guy who made Donnie Darko, which critics adored. Everyone wanted in on his next project, including Dwayne. Bad call. Southland Tales barely made $1 million on a $17 million budget. In 2007, Dwayne took a gamble and bowed before the Mouse House. The Game Plan, which turned out to be a massive hit, $147 million on a $22 million budget. Then came Get Smart, a comedy where Dwayne played a supporting role. It also did well, and it looked like things were finally turning around. 2009, Dwayne starred in Planet 51, Tooth Fairy, yes, he was the fairy, and Race to Witch Mountain, where he mostly just playing meme. All three massive flops. Witch Mountain hurt the most, with a bloated budget rumored to be between 50 and 70 million. It barely managed 106 million at the box office. During the making of Tooth Fairy, he realized that the people around him, his agent, his managers, his whole entourage, were steering him off a cliff in a tutu. So he fired everyone. Clean slate. He later said he simply saw the wrong people taking him in the wrong direction and decided he knew better where to go. With his old team still under contract, one final film slipped out, The Other Guys, where Dwayne had what was basically a third-string role, and yep, that one flopped too. The first film of the new Dwayne was Faster, and yeah, it flopped again. But according to his ex-wife, who also happened to be his manager, this was actually a very smart move. Because along with Faster, Dwayne and his new team also locked down something way more important. A film that would change everything Officially, Dwayne landed the role by accident. Originally, it was meant for Tommy Lee Jones. He bailed at the last minute, and suddenly there was a rock-shaped hole in the franchise. The Family Guy, you-know-who, claims it was his idea to bring in Dwayne. Supposedly, he read a random online comment from a girl saying she wanted to see Johnson in a Fast and Furious movie. And he thought, hey, that's kind of genius. It made $626 million on a $125 million budget, a monster hit. And just like that, Dwayne Johnson forgot what the words box office failure even meant. For the next 10 years, he wouldn't hear them again. Well, with one exception. The first film after Fast 5 was a smaller action flick called Snitch. He basically worked for peanuts. The budget was just $15 million, and it still managed to pull in $60 million at the box office. Then came Journey to the Mysterious Island, which was originally meant to be a Brendan Fraser vehicle. Why he got replaced? Well, that's where the stories get juicy. One rumor says Brendan only wanted to work with Eric Brevig, the director of the first Journey to the Center of the Earth. When the studio brought in Brad Payton for the sequel, Fraser supposedly noped out. Another version blames Fraser's unlucky streak after 2008. And then there's the dark version, the one Brendan himself has hinted at. He claims a certain shady producer crossed a major line, got handsy, and made some offers. Fraser refused. The first movie did a respectable $241 million. But then Dwayne showed up, flexed once, and boom, $335 million at the box office. Then came that weird little movie where Dwayne was shoved into a supporting role. It was 2013, and the film was called Empire State. Just $11 million, budget, classic Emmett Furla territory. He only shot for about a week, which honestly sounds like the standard Bruce Willis formula during his contractual servitude to Emmett Furla. Minimal effort, minimal budget, maximum questions. Meanwhile, Dwayne was pulling in $15 million for G.I. Joe Retaliation and another $10 million for Fast and Furious 6, and then there was Empire State. The whole thing looks like he was just paying off someone's debt. Maybe his, maybe someone else's, who knows. Right after that unforgettable masterpiece, Dwayne came crashing into theaters again with G.I. Joe Retaliation, the sequel that decided, screw continuity, let's just throw in The Rock, Channing Tatum gone. And the reason is honestly hilarious. The first G.I. Joe movie underperformed, and in 2011, when they were filming the sequel, studio figured the best move was to kill him off early and treat the sequel like a soft reboot. Back in 2012, test screenings for G.I. Joe Retaliation sparked a bit of drama. The movie's release, originally planned for mid-2012, was abruptly pushed to spring 2013. Audiences only seemed to enjoy a couple of early scenes, the ones with Dwayne and Channing. Dwayne was blowing up, he had 2 box office hits that year, so naturally test audiences were like, wait, why is this guy barely in the movie? We want more of that duo. Studio execs panicked, hit the brakes, and scrambled to stretch the opening, even going back to film new scenes with Johnson and Tatum to give the illusion that this was their buddy movie all along. In the end, Retaliation did okay. $375 million on a $130 million budget. But okay isn't great when you're dealing with a blockbuster franchise that owes a cut of the profits to Hasbro. In short, you need more than okay to make action figure overlords happy. They didn't cancel the idea of a direct sequel. They circled around it for years, but something always got in the way. Then, in 2021, the studio gave us Snake Eyes, a G.I. Joe spin-off that managed to crash and burn in spectacular fashion. Still, Hasbro's not giving up. Now, they're promising the ultimate toy box crossover, G.I. Joe and Transformers. Well, because when storytelling fails, you just smash 2 IPs together and hope for the best. Right alongside G.I. Joe Retaliation, Dwayne dropped a cinematic nuke with Fast and Furious 6, which exploded at the box office with $788 million on a $160 million budget. He closed out 2013 with Pain and Gain, a smaller, grittier film directed by Michael Bay. Shockingly, the budget was only $26 million, practically a lunch bill by Bay's standards. Everyone involved agreed to work for a cut of the profits instead of fat, upfront paychecks. In 2014, Dwayne officially became Hercules. And honestly, after the cinematic disaster known as The Legend of Hercules, starring Kellen Lutz, and directed by the one and only Rennie Harlin, Any other Hercules movie was bound to look like a masterpiece by comparison. Not because it was amazing, just because there was literally no further down to go. Originally, Hercules was supposed to be directed by Peter Berg, the same guy who did The Rundown with Dwayne, but after his massive box office bomb Battleship sank like a stone in 2012, Berg jumped ship to focus on a smaller, safer project, Lone Survivor. That's when the reins were handed over to Brett Ratner, best known for the Rush Hour series and questionable behavior at Hollywood parties. Ratner tweaked the script to match his style, and what we got was, well, what we got. Hercules ended up making $250 million on a $100 million budget, not a monster hit, but decent enough for a sword and sandals movie where most of the budget went into oiling Johnson's muscles. In 2015, Dwayne came back swinging, not just with another Fast and Furious film, but also by outrunning an earthquake in San Andreas. Fast and Furious 7 crushed the box office with a jaw-dropping $1.5 billion, while San Andreas pulled in a solid $474 million on a $110 million budget. Around the same time, he also signed on to a little HBO series called Ballers. It was his chance to relive his football days, and in true Rock fashion, he didn't just star in it, he discovered talent too. Thanks to Dwayne, the world found out that Denzel Washington's son is not just a legacy kid, he's seriously talented. Ballers ran for 5 strong seasons with solid ratings. Then came 2016, and Dwayne delivered another double-hit year. One was Moana, where he voiced the instantly iconic Maui, and the other, Central Intelligence, the buddy action comedy with Kevin Hart that made $215 million on a $50 million budget. In 2017, Dwayne delivered 3 box office hits, well, 2 real hits and one that landed somewhere near a bag of stale chips. We're talking about Baywatch. The film was based on the iconic TV series that ran from 1989 to 2001. Dwayne claimed to be a huge fan growing up, which is why he jumped at the chance to lead the reboot. He also claimed they knew critics would hate it, just like they hated the original show, and that the movie was made for the fans, not the critics. Which raises the question, if they were really making this for the fans, why was the only guy they stripped down on screen a dude who looks like Steven Seagal's gym buddy? Zac Efron even scored a Worst Actor nod, but Dwayne somehow dodged the golden bullet. The film also got an R rating, mostly for some random swearing. In the end, Baywatch earned $179 million on a $69 million budget. Not a disaster, but definitely underwhelming. Thankfully, that little miss was immediately steamrolled by 2 absolute monsters. The Fate of the Furious brought in $1.2 billion, and Jumanji: Welcome to the Jungle pulled in a jaw-dropping $962 million on a $110 million budget. The Rock is actually pretty depressive. He's spoken openly about it, how he's battled depression multiple times throughout his life. The first wave hit when he had to say goodbye to football, then again in 2008 when he went through a divorce. Right during the slump in his career, that's when he famously fired his entire management team and joined a new family, as he puts it. Fast forward to 2017, another bout of depression hit him hard. But this time, he says he was saved by friends and good people who pulled him out of the dark. So what's Dwayne's advice? Simple. Have money, have friends, and have family, ideally all 3 at the same time. Because when your brain starts throwing dark thoughts at you, sometimes all it takes is a good slap on the back from someone who actually gives a damn. In 2018, Dwayne went full blockbuster mode with Rampage and Skyscraper. Skyscraper pulled in $305 million on a $125 million budget, while Rampage did even better, $429 million on a $140 million budget. Dwayne's schedule was booked for years, and by now, let's be honest, no one's holding their breath for a sequel. That ship sailed. In 2019, he got his very own Fast and Furious spin-off, Hobbs and Shaw, which racked up a solid $760 million. Then he returned to the jungle in Jumanji: The Next Level, earning $801 million on a $132 million budget. And finally, he made a cameo-sized appearance in a much smaller film, Fighting with My Family, a wrestling dramedy that made $42 million on an $11 million budget. From 2011 to 2019, Dwayne Johnson starred in 19 movies. Only one of them was that weird Emmett Furla project, the kind usually reserved for late-career Bruce Willis. 2 others, Baywatch and Hercules, barely earned enough to buy a few donuts, but the remaining 16 were all box office hits. Sure, 4 of those were Fast and Furious entries, which probably would have done fine without him. But the other 12? That's all Dwayne. Honestly, try finding another actor with that kind of commercial consistency across 9 years. Only Leonardo DiCaprio came close, but if we're being real, no one's dragging Skyscraper or Central Intelligence to 400 million on the back of Leo's brooding eyes and Oscar bait. With Dwayne, it wasn't about prestige. It was about showing up, showing out, and showing studios the money. But all good runs eventually end. For Dwayne Johnson, the golden streak began to fade with the pandemic. In mid-2021, Jungle Cruise hit theaters and promptly underperformed. It grossed $220 million on a $200 million budget. Yes, it came out during COVID-era restrictions, mask mandates, space seating, and the general vibe that going to the movies might kill your grandma. Maybe under normal circumstances, it could have done better. Later that same year, Dwayne made his big Netflix debut with Red Notice. It shattered Netflix records and to this day remains the platform's most watched film of all time, assuming we can trust Netflix's internal statistics. Then came 2022, and with it, Dwayne's long-awaited Black Adam. Originally, Warner Bros. Wanted to introduce the character in the first Shazam movie, but Dwayne said, no thanks. He wanted something bigger, darker, and of course, more centered around himself. So instead, he ordered a brand new script built entirely around Black Adam as the lead. That's why it took so long to bring the character to the big screen, even though Dwayne had signed with DC back in 2014. For months before release, he flooded social media with behind-the-scenes hype, promising the film would change the hierarchy of power in the DC universe. There were epic reshoots, added scenes, big teases, and endless slow-motion cape shots. But when Black Adam finally landed in theaters, it didn't land quite the way Dwayne hoped. It pulled in $393 million on a $260 million budget. Not exactly a franchise-launching home run. The box office wasn't a disaster, but it sure wasn't heroic either. Dwayne's most recent film was Red One, and it didn't exactly go smoothly. Multiple crew members reportedly complained that Dwayne had developed a bad habit of showing up late to set. Very late. The constant delays ballooned the film's budget into the stratosphere, ending up at a staggering $250 million and just $182 million return. But Dwayne's not done. He's already filmed The Smashing Machine, a dramatic biopic where he's reportedly chasing that long-elusive Oscar nod. So word is, he's going all in. Physical transformation, dramatic depth, the whole award season playbook. Meanwhile, Netflix isn't giving up either. The scripts for Red Notice 2 and Red Notice 3 are finished, and the plan is to shoot both back-to-back, because getting all 3 stars in one place is like aligning the planets, expensive planets. So, to sum it all up, The Rock has started to slow down just a little. A few recent misfires, sure, but nothing that's truly damaged his career. He's still one of the most in-demand actors in Hollywood, with projects lined up for the next 5 years. The man stays booked. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe.